The NFL season is getting closer every day. Let's get into a few hypothetical trades. Katie Caldwell and Jeff Lloyd back here with you. Jeff, ESPN put out an article proposing 5 win-win trades during training camp. So let's get into it and see if you agree that these would actually be a win-win. So this is the first trade they've proposed. Number one, Packers trade for Kayvon Thibodeau and a 2026 fifth round pick. They receive a second rounder in 2025. Do you like this one?
I understand the need of a pass rusher, and we talked about this when we were talking, a little bit more in depth in the NFC North and about the Green Bay Packers in general. When you have these teams who are, we believe are playoff teams, we believe maybe are a little bit short of championship game contender, and then you try to dig through and maybe what's the shortcoming. Elite pass rusher is kind of one of the things you come to mind when you're talking about the Green Bay Packers. Certainly, just don't seem to have that guy. Now, the thing, where this would be interesting is this is what the strength of the New York Giants is right now. With the addition of Abdul Carter, with Burns, with Thibodeau, with Dexter Lawrence, this team is built for nickel and dime pass rushing situations. So for the Giants, the thing here would be justifying why you brought in Carter to give yourself a plus in pass rush and then subtracting, Thibodeau into that range. This is something where maybe it doesn't sound like such a great idea now, but when you get closer to trade deadline and now you have teams saying, hey, I don't think this is our year, and you may be in a certain situation with contract wise whatever, or the money's starting to add up at one position. This is something that maybe could have more legs closer to the trade deadline, but I don't disagree with Green Bay entertaining the thought of trying to get any pass rush help they can get right now.
Okay, number two, Cardinals receive wide receiver Dontavian Wicks, and the Packers receive a 2026 fourth round pick.
It's interesting because you have two teams here that I think uh, are very viable for this year, and you're trying to find just exactly what that missing piece is for any one of these teams. So, I think that would work for both teams. The question, and it's certainly when you're talking skill players and doing it this time of year is it's not something you really can just bring somebody in late August because it might be a week or two before that player is entrenched in enough in the system that you can kind of get the max return. So, I mean, if you're going to do something like that, especially with the skill position, you want to get that guy in there quicker. I mean, like now would be the time so you can work out, your hiccups, your bumps in the road, and those aren't starting to come in week one and week two as, you're now playing for legitimacy. But that is something that would probably work for both those teams involved. Yes.
Okay, a win-win. So the third one, the Raiders receive cornerback Greg Newsome and a 2027 seventh round pick. The Browns receive a 2026 seventh round pick.
This one has probably changed since the time of, this story being published. And Greg Newsome, I would probably say for the last three off seasons, there's always been Greg Newsome could be on the block. Greg Newsome could be on the block. Greg Newsome could be on the block. It was a really interesting scenario. Greg Newsome came in, as a rookie with Cleveland Browns, started on the outside and actually was a really, really solid player. Year two, he kind of, through injuries, was off to a little bit of a slower start. The Browns at the time had just drafted Martin Emerson Jr., Martin Emerson, big, long corner. He was holed up on the outside. Newsome began to getting more reps on the inside. The two of them are close, but, Greg Newsome never hid from the fact that, I think I'm a full-time corner in the NFL. You want to put me down there because you feel that's a situation that, I need to attend to, but he still felt that, his game translated to the outside. The Browns can't do this move now with Martin Emerson now out for the year. And it was always a difficult spot for Cleveland because Newsome and Emerson both are in contract years. That's a tough thing for Martin Emerson to go down just as you're about to begin a contract year. But Newsome kind of now gets the opportunity he's been hoping for. He gets to go back out on the outside, play for a contract extension or a new contract with somebody else, and gets to do it at the popular money spot. The NFL does not, agrees that nickel corners and slot corners are a tremendous need in the NFL. And they don't necessarily counteract that by paying for that. They pay the guys on the outside. But for Greg Newsome, this situation, obviously, basically, yes, he saw his friend go down, but it certainly gave him an opportunity that he's been waiting for and hoping to, get back here with Cleveland. So Newsome, this is probably something where the Browns probably need a corner as opposed to giving up a corner because there's just not much on this roster after Denzel Ward and Greg Newsome. And, the Browns season, you don't know, how much pass defense is going to matter because a lot of that is going to come down to whether or not their offense can, basically, put enough points on the board, control the ball enough, where the Browns defense can kind of get to what they're best at, which is, pass rush and coverage. But right now, it looks like, Greg Newsome's going to get his wish. He's going to get to play on the outside, and he's, hopefully going to get to, go through this season and just do everything he can to help himself financially.
This next one was so interesting to me. I love the thought of a three-team trade across any sport. It's so
Right.
fun. So the Bears receive running back Rashad White, a 2027 seventh round pick from the Chargers. Stay with me here. The Chargers receive running back DeAndre Swift, a 2026 sixth round pick from the Bears. Then the Buccaneers receive a 2026 fifth round pick, also from the Bears.
Certainly, a lot of moving parts here. The first thing I think is, the Tampa Bay backfield is a lot different now than it was when the season started a year ago. You had players in that, Bucky Irving became a really, really integral part of that backfield. And, so did Sean Tucker. And it kind of, put White on the outside looking in. What I think where White is interesting in that scenario, you look at the success Jahmyr Gibbs had with Detroit, within that offense that is now going to go through with Chicago. Jahmyr Gibbs is a phenomenal player, but one of his great attributes is his ability in the passing game. I think White gives you that. So I think Chicago is probably trying to find a way. And I think maybe they feel that maybe Swift just isn't the receiver that they would necessarily need. Obviously, there's a bunch of new people in Chicago, and we'll see how this is all going to get worked out, as this new regime begins. But White going that route and going to Chicago would probably work. Anybody that would be, kind of going to the Chargers in this scenario, I don't know how that's going to work. That is a stacked backfield right now. You just spent a first round pick on it. Najee Harris was brought in as well, through free agency. The Chargers, who are a darling of mine this year, I really think they're going to be a team that shows a lot this year. But I also think for the Chargers, maybe anything they might need, they would probably want to put towards the defensive side of the ball. As good as I think they can be this year, there are some reservations I have about that side of the ball for them. The Chargers are just going to be good. They're going to be really good. They're going to be really sound. Bringing in Keenan Allen is a great thing to do for a guy like Justin Herbert, who's got now all these new weapons that he's certainly getting acquainted with, but certainly has the weapon that he was most familiar with his entire career to this point. So, that definitely a lot of through moving parts, and the thought of a three-way trade within the NFL definitely is astounding. But for the Chargers, I think the only thing the Chargers would be looking for is, how do we just, continue to maybe add a piece or two to the defense, because that offense is now locked and loaded. I mean, the running backs are good. The wide receivers with bringing Allen back are great. The offensive line is rock solid. Herbert's one of the best in the league. Chargers probably built up for a hell of a run here in 25.
And you're right that it does make sense on paper, but we've also talked about in the show so many times that Jim Harbaugh wants to run the ball. So with him in the mix, you never really know. Okay, trade number 5. So the Dolphins receive cornerback Joshua Williams. The Chiefs receive a 2027 sixth round pick.
Well, there's no, hiding from it. Miami's got some serious secondary issues. There is not going to be one returning starter for the Miami Dolphins in their secondary this year. That is, it's really, and granted, you say 4 guys, but, those 4 guys are on the field and ideally should be on the field for every defensive snap your defense takes. So it's certainly, a legitimate hit that the Dolphins are going through right now. I do have my reservations on the Dolphins as a whole this year. So maybe, going out and, acquiring things and giving up future assets may not be the best route to go for the Dolphins. Tua, you appreciate everything about it, but it's such a weird scenario where, you almost want to play your starting quarterback in a red jersey and hope nobody hits him. Their offense, the playmakers, I think Tyreek Hill. I'm not saying Tyreek Hill is, done, but Tyreek Hill is, I think the boom effect of what Tyreek Hill has been in this time of the NFL is starting to, come off a little bit. I think Jalen Waddle has probably proven he's just as an efficient receiver there as well. And without the threat of that passing game and the big chunk plays that they can give you with Miami, it probably is going to take away from what the run game has been able to do the last couple of years. The Dolphins probably shouldn't be buying anything right now. If I'm the Dolphins, you're looking for, you got to clear the waiver wire for what you need in the secondary. But it's time to start taking a couple of gambles on young guys that, maybe just haven't gotten the opportunity yet because your division's a lot different now. The thoughts of New England are certainly a lot higher than they were a year ago. The Jets, a lot of people feel the Jets, if Fields can go in and play competent ball, the Jets should be a much more improved team. And of course, we all know the powerhouse that Buffalo is. It looks like there's definitely a shifting of the power in the AFC. And unfortunately, Miami might be on the wrong end of that.
I think you could be absolutely right on that. And we want to hear from you. If you're a GM, are these a win win? Would you be making any of these trades? Let us know in the comments below.